The day my daughter-in-law told me I was becoming a burden, I was standing at my own kitchen sink washing the same coffee mug my husband bought me at a flea market in 1986. I didn't drop it. I didn't say a single word she expected me to say. I dried that mug, set it on the rack where it had lived for 38 years, and I said, "You might be right. Let me think on it." What she didn't know was that I'd already been thinking. And by the time my thinking was done, she and my son would be the ones looking for somewhere to live. My name is Margene Ashby. I'm 67 years old, and I want to tell you what happened in the spring of last year because I think there are a lot of women out there who need to hear it. If you're listening from somewhere far from Ohio, do me a favor and leave your town in the comments. I like knowing how far a story can travel. And stay with me to the end, because the ending is the part I'm still proud of. It started on a Tuesday in March. I remember because Tuesdays were the days I drove my granddaughter Briar to her piano lesson, and that morning the roads were still slick from a late frost. I was in the kitchen of the house on Hollin Drive, the house my husband Walt and I bought in 1979, with a down payment we scraped together from his overtime at the Goodyear plant, and the money I made sewing alterations out of our spare bedroom. I raised my boy in that house. I buried my husband from that house. The crack in the linoleum by the stove was from the day Walt dropped a cast iron skillet the Christmas our son turned 10, and I never fixed it because every time I looked at it I could hear him laughing. My son Travis came down the stairs that morning dressed for the office. He's 43 now, sells commercial insurance, drives a leased Audi he can't really afford. Behind him came his wife, Corinne. She was in those expensive leggings she wears, the kind that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a week, and she went straight to the counter and started wiping down a surface that was already clean. That's how I knew. When a woman starts cleaning something that doesn't need cleaning, she's getting up the nerve to say something she's already rehearsed. Travis poured himself coffee from the machine they brought in, some chrome contraption with a screen on it, instead of the percolator I'd used since the Carter administration. He sat down across from me at the table Walt built. The winter I was pregnant, the one with the burn ring from a hot pan that I always covered with a doily. "Mom," he said, "Corinne and I has been talking. The royal we. I've learned that when my son says, 'Corinne and I have been talking,' what follows is never good news for me. We're a little worried about you out here," he went on. "The house is a lot. The stairs, the yard, the gutters, and with Dad gone 4 years now, 4 years and 2 months, I said. Right, we just think it might be time to look at something easier. Somewhere you'd be looked after." Corinne turned around then finally. "There's a beautiful place over in Maple Ridge," she said, like she was offering me a vacation. "It's a retirement community. They have a pool, water books, a movie night. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." "And what happens to this house?" I asked. The two of them looked at each other. That little glance married couples do when they've already decided and are just waiting for the other one to say it out loud. "Well," Travis said, "that's the thing. The market's good right now. If we sold it, or fixed it up and rented it, the equity could really help us. Corinne's been wanting to open her own studio. A wellness studio," Corinne said. "Yoga and sound baths. And honestly, Mum, you living here alone, it's a lot of money just sitting in walls. Money just sitting in walls." That's what my whole life had become to them. 45 years of memories, and they saw a savings account they couldn't get into. I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't argue. I'd watched my own mother argue and beg her way through being pushed around, and it never once worked. So I just nodded and said, "When would you want me out?" They both blinked. They braced for a fight, and I'd handed them a door instead. "We're not saying right away," Travis said quickly. 6 months maybe, whatever's comfortable." "All right," I said. "Let me think on it." Of course, Corinne said, and the relief in her voice made my stomach turn. She patted my hand on her way out. Cold fingers, soft, not a callus on them. There was a tennis bracelet on her wrist that I happened to know cost $2,200 because Travis had borrowed the money from me 2 Christmases back and never paid it back. After they left for work, I sat at that table a long while. Then I got up and I walked through my house. I touched a door frame where Walt and I had marked Travis's height every birthday until he turned 12 and declared himself too grown for it. I touched the mantel Walt built from barnwood he hauled out of his uncle's collapsing tobacco shed. I went up to the spare room, the one that's Corinne's meditation space now, where the rocket ship wallpaper still hides behind a coat of greige paint because they were too cheap to strip it. Travis wanted to be an astronaut once. I bought him a telescope the year money was so tight we ate beans for a month. I wondered where that telescope went, and then I went to my bedroom, to the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, and I lifted out the things that mattered. The deed, Walt's death certificate, our marriage license, yellowed soft as cloth, and underneath all of it, a shoebox. My grandmother used to tell me, Margine, a woman keeps 3 things her whole life, her faith, her good name, and her receipts, because someday somebody's going to tell you that you never gave anything, and you'd better be able to prove them a liar. I'd kept my receipts, every check, every cancelled draft. I sat on the floor and I went through them. $8,000 March 2017, the down payment on Travis's first house. $11,000 summer of 2019, when his student loans came due and he said the bank was about to garnish his wages. $14,000 for Corinne's first failed business, the candle company. $6,000 when Briar started private school. $2,200 for the bracelet. $3,000 the time their basement flooded. I added it all up sitting there on the cold floor. $61,000 over 8 years. Not loans. Gifts. Because that's what mothers do. We give and we don't keep a ledger. Except I had, because my grandmother told me to, and that day I understood why. Somewhere in those years, my help had stopped being help and started being expected, and once a thing is expected, the person giving it becomes invisible. I'd made myself small for so long I'd nearly disappeared, and now they wanted to finish the job. I pulled out the deed and read it, and that's where my hands started to shake, not from fear, from something else. 2 years back, right after Walt passed, when I was so deep in grief I'd have signed anything, Travis sat me down and said it would make things simpler for the estate if I added his name to the deed, said it was just good planning. I was too tired to question my own son, so I signed. The deed said both of us, joint tenants with right of survivorship. I didn't know what that meant, but I was about to find out. I did something I hadn't done in years. I called somebody who wasn't family. Thurna Tillis and I had sung in the same church choir for 30 years before she traded the choir robe for a real estate license. She picked up on the second ring and hollered my name like we were still teenagers. Verna, I said, I need to sell my house. The line went quiet a beat. Your house, Margine, the one on Holland, that's the one. Does Travis know? No. And it needs to stay that way until the ink's dry. There was a long pause, and then she said, in that low voice church women use when they're not surprised but they're sure disappointed, What did he do, honey? So I told her. The whole thing. The coffee, the leggings, the wellness studio, the equity sitting in walls. How fast can you move, she asked. How fast can you find me a buyer who deserves it? Give me a week. No sign in the yard. No online listing. I'll show it private to people I know personally. Amar Jane, you need a lawyer before you do one more thing. There's a woman, Antoinette Brevard, does family property law, sharp as a tack. I'll text you her number. I called Antoinette Brevard that same afternoon, and 2 days later I was sitting across a polished desk from her downtown. She was maybe 55, silver hair cut close, half glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of calm that comes from having seen every ugly thing people do to each other over money. I laid it all out. She listened without writing a word, just watching me, and when I finished she put her hand out for the deed. She read it twice. Then she said, "Margine, do you understand what joint tenancy means while you're still living?" "I don't." "It means you still own half this house outright. You have every legal right to it. You can even force a sale if you want to. You are not a guest in your own home." She set the deed down. "But I want to check something else." She turned to her computer and ran what she called a title search, and I watched her face change. She turned the screen toward me. "Did you take out a home equity line of credit last year?" she asked. $90,000, opened February of last year. I did no such thing. There's a signature on the application. Is this yours? I leaned in close. It was my name all right, Margine Ashby. But it wasn't my hand. I've signed my name the same crooked way since I was a girl, with a loop on the M Walt always teased me about, and that loop wasn't there. "That is not my signature," I said. My voice came out small. Antoinette folded her hands. "Then what we are looking at, Margine, is forgery. Somebody forged your name to borrow $90,000 against a house you co-own, and here's what that tells me." She tapped the screen. "This wasn't decided over breakfast last Tuesday. They've been planning this for over a year. They borrowed against the house already, and now they need you out so they can sell or refinance without you in the way." I sat there and I felt the floor drop out from under everything I'd believed about my own son. All that worry about my knees and the stairs, all that talk about a pool and water aerobics. It had never once been about me. It was a business plan, and I was the line item they needed to delete. Antoinette didn't let me sit in it long. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. "Here's what we do. First, I file a dispute on that line of credit citing the forged signature, and I freeze it today. Second, we set up a living trust so you control where everything goes, not some automatic survivorship clause that hands it all to him. Third, if you want to sell, you have every right, and I'll make sure it's airtight. The question is only what you want." "I want to sell," I said. I'd never been so sure of anything in my life. She looked at me over those half glasses. "You're certain? Once this starts, there's no soft landing for them." I thought about Corinne's cold hand on mine, about the word burden, about my husband's barnwood mantle becoming somebody's open concept feature wall. "I'm certain." I walked out to my car in the cold March sun with a freeze on the fraud, a trust in the works and a path forward, and I sat behind the wheel, and I didn't cry. I called Werner. "List it," I said. "Find me good people." What I'd forgotten was that Corinne is not stupid. She's a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Werner brought her photographer out the following week, while Corinne was at her Pilates class, and Travis was downtown chasing a policy. A young woman named Dorwitz walked through my house with a camera and saw things, really saw them, the way the afternoon light pulled on the kitchen floor, the smooth dip worn into the banister by 45 years of hands, the peach tree out back that Walt planted the spring Travis was born. "This house has been loved," she said quietly, and I had to look away. Werner priced it at $420,000, conservative for the neighborhood, and swore she'd only show it to people she'd vetted herself. No flippers, no developers, just folks looking for a home. The first couple she brought through stood in my kitchen and talked about gutting it to the studs, opening it up, ripping out the original oak floors for luxury vinyl because it photographs better. The wife never once lowered her voice. After they left, Werner drew a hard line through their name without my saying a word. The second was a developer in a sharp suit who didn't even pretend to look at the house. He paced the backyard, talking about tearing it down for townhomes, 4 units. This block is about to pop. I told him no before he could make an offer. Werner walked him out, smiling, and came back shaking her head. I brought him on purpose, she said, so you'd see what you're saying no to. The third was different. A couple in their early 60s came in a Buick that had seen some years. He held the door for her. She held his hand walking up my path. Her name was Odessa. His was Lemuel. They didn't take pictures or pull out a tape measure. They just walked slow and touched things gently, like the house might be listening. Lemuel stopped at the kitchen window. "Is that a peach tree? My husband planted it the year our son was born. Doesn't make sweet fruit anymore, though." "They don't after a while," he said. "But it still blooms, doesn't it? Every spring." Odessa ran her hand along the banister, not checking for dust, just feeling the years in it. "Why are you selling, if you don't mind my asking?" I could have lied, said downsizing, but there was something in her face. "Because it's mine," I said, "and I want it to go to somebody who knows what that means." She nodded slow. "We lost our place in the crash. Took us 14 years to claw back to this. We're not looking to flip anything. We're just looking for a home with a soul still in it." After they left, Werner and I sat at the table. "They want to make a full-price offer," she said. "Cash. They can close in 3 weeks." I looked out at the peach tree. "Accept it," I said. But before the ink dried, Corinne found Werner's business card. It had slipped out of my purse and onto the laundry room floor, and Corinne came up the stairs with it pinched between 2 fingers like something dead. "What is this?" She didn't knock. She never does. "It's a business card," I said. "You called a realtor." Her face went red. "We're already helping you find a place, and you go behind our backs, behind your backs," I repeated, and something in me that had been folded up small for years finally stood up straight. I went to the cedar chest, lifted out the shoebox, and started laying the receipts on my bed one by one. "What is that?" she said. "This," I said, picking up the first check, "is the $8,000 for Travis's down payment. This is the 11 for the loans. This is the 14,000 for your candle company. This is the bracelet on your wrist." I kept going. She kept getting paler. $61,000, Corinne. Over 8 years. To people who just told me I'm a burden. "I never asked you to keep track," she said. "I didn't keep track to throw it in your face. I kept it because my grandmother knew that someday somebody would stand in my own bedroom and tell me I never gave a thing." I straightened up. "I gave everything. I just gave it where it didn't come with a paycheck or a title, so to you it doesn't count. You want to call the unpaid work invisible? Fine, but invisible isn't the same as nothing." She opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time since she married my son, Corinne Ashby had nothing to say. Travis came home early that night, Corinne having clearly called him in a panic. He took the stairs 2 at a time and threw open my door. "Mum, what is going on? Corinne says you're selling the house." "I am. I've accepted an offer. We close in 3 weeks. "You can't do that," he said. "You can't just." "I can. I'm a co-owner. My lawyers confirmed it. I handed him a folder Antoinette had prepared for me. You might want to read that first." He opened it and I watched the blood leave his face. The freeze notice. $90,000. Forged signature. Under investigation. "Mum, I can explain." "I don't want an explanation," I said, and I sat him down the way I had when he was a boy in trouble, and I told him about the treehouse he built when he was 8, how his dad and I bought every board and held every ladder. but how he'd called it his because he'd put himself into it. "This house is my treehouse, Travis. Your father and I poured the footings in the heat of August 1979, and I was carrying you when we did it. Every board in this house we bled for, and you turned it into a number." He started to cry then, my big grown son in his expensive suit. "We're stretched so thin, Mum," he said. "The lease, the school, Corinne's business. We needed the equity. I told myself you'd be better off, but the truth is we just needed the money." "Thank you," I said, "for telling me the truth. That's where we're going to have to start." I didn't scream at him. There wasn't any point. I just told him the buyers were good people, that his share of the sale would clear his debts, and that he had 3 weeks to find somewhere to live. The closing took 90 minutes. After the lawyers split the proceeds 3 ways, me, Travis, and Corinne each got just over $130,000, enough for them to pay off that fraudulent loan and still start fresh. I drove to the little rented cottage I'd found 2 towns over on a quiet street near the library. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for Briar whenever she wanted to come. I left Travis the furniture, all of it, even the table Walt built, because it belonged to the house. And I left an envelope on Matt's table with 3 keys and a letter telling him where I'd gone, that he was welcome when he was ready to see me as his mother and not his bank, and a P.S. reminding him the peach tree needed pruning the 3rd week of February, the way his father always did it. There was one thing he never knew. A week after closing, Antoinette called me back to her office. She'd kept digging, and she'd found a loan application from the year before. $200,000, a renovation loan, denied only because they couldn't get my signature on it. On the application they'd listed the house's value at well over what I sold it for, with full architectural plans to gut it and flip it. "This was never about a pool and water aerobics, Margine," she said. "You were the obstacle in a spreadsheet." I sat with that a while. Then I did the only thing that made any sense. I had Antoinette write Briar in as the sole beneficiary of my trust. Not Travis, not Corinne, my granddaughter. By the time she's grown, that money will have grown right along with her. College, a first home, whatever she needs. It's between me, my lawyer, and God, and nobody finds out until they need to. Travis comes around now. Slowly. He's been seeing a counselor, and the first time he came to the cottage, he told me she'd asked him to describe me as a person, not as his mother. And he couldn't do it. Said he realized he'd never actually known me at all. I told him that was an honest place to start. Corinne is trying too, in her way. We'll see. Trust takes years to build, and a second to break, and I'm not in any hurry. Briar stays over most weekends. We bake, we read. Verna comes by Sunday mornings with coffee, and we sit on my little porch and talk about everything and nothing. There's a garden out back now, tomatoes and collards and herbs in mismatched pots, and the morning light comes through my kitchen window just exactly right. I spent 45 years building a house, and another 20 filling it with people who forgot I was the foundation under all of it. The cottage is 1/3 the size of the place on Holland Drive. But I have never in my life had so much room. I sold a house while my son was at work, but what I really sold was the woman who kept making herself smaller, so everybody else could feel big. My name is Margin Ashby. I'm 67 years old. I built a home with my own 2 hands. Lost it to people who forgot I mattered, and then I built something better, a life where the first person I matter to is me. And I'm telling you, if you're sitting in a house you love feeling like a stranger in it, go find your receipts, get yourself a good lawyer, and remember you don't owe anybody your dignity. The world will try to make you small, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're kind. Don't let it take up the whole room. You earned it. For a long time after I left the house on Holland Drive, I sat with one question: how did it ever get this far? And the honest answer is that nothing in my story happened by accident. Every ending grew straight out of a seed somebody planted years before. Travis didn't wake up one Tuesday and decide his mother was a line item. He learned slow and quiet that whatever he needed would appear, that my yes was automatic, that love with no edges to it could be leaned on like a wall that would never fall. I taught him that. I have to own it. When you give and never once name the cost, you don't raise a grateful child. You raise one who stops seeing you at all. The cause was my own silence, and the effect was a forged signature on a loan I never signed. But cause and effect cut the other way too, because my grandmother taught me to keep my receipts. I had proof when proof was the only thing that could save me. Because I'd kept my word clean my whole life, a woman from my old choir picked up the phone and moved heaven and earth for me. Because I chose to do the right thing even when the wrong thing would have felt good. I didn't scream, I didn't lie, I didn't punish Corinne the way part of me wanted to. I walked out of that closing able to look myself in the mirror. Doing right by people isn't weakness. It's the only thing that lets you sleep at night when everything else is on fire. What got me through, though, wasn't only my conscience. It was learning to think clearly when my heart wanted to fall apart. There's a kind of wisdom that has nothing to do with school. It's knowing the difference between a person who's tired and a person who's being taken. It's reading a deed instead of trusting a smile. It's asking the next question when the first answer makes your stomach turn. I almost didn't ask. I almost let me think on it turn into, all right, I'll go. The smartest thing I ever did was refuse to be rushed, and none of it would have mattered without the nerve to actually move. Knowing a thing is wrong is easy. Standing up at 67, calling a lawyer, signing your real name in your own crooked hand, and walking away from 45 years of memories, that takes a backbone you have to build for yourself, because nobody hands it to you. I found mine late, but I found it. So if you're sitting where I sat, hear me. Be good, but don't be a doormat. Be smart enough to look at the paperwork, not just the faces, and be brave enough to choose yourself, even when the people who should love you forget that you're a person at all. I lost a house. I kept Margine. That was always the better trade.